Hello beautiful people, welcome to Mimsy Vids. I am Marwa aka Mimsy, and today I'm going to talk about the 4 main reasons why people are Muslim. So why they believe Islam is the true religion. So it won't include things such as there must be more to life and the other questions that actually many other religions will also have answers to and will have similarities to Islam. What I wanted to pinpoint for this video is basically why Islam, why specifically Islam, what makes you think actually Islam must be the truth because of this. So after speaking to many Muslims about this, there were 4 things that kept coming up. So I'm basically going to go through those 4 reasons why they believe Islam to be true. As a side note also, when I was Muslim, these were things that I also valued and thought this is the reason why it must be true. The first one is the Quran itself. So basically that the Quran itself is a miracle because of its beauty and eloquence and the way that it's been constructed. You know, there's no way that that could have been a human construction. It's got to be from a God because of its perfection. Because of that, it's often said, you know, well, if you try and create something like the Quran, you won't be able to. But also that it was brought by the Prophet Muhammad, who actually was illiterate, you know, and it's this kind of, well, how can an illiterate man come up with such beauty and eloquence? You know, that must mean that it's a miracle and that it's straight from God. It's understood by Muslims that the classical Quranic Arabic is so beautiful, and you know, the Arabs of that time were just in awe of its beauty. So I obviously have a few problems with this. Firstly, the basic concept of beauty. Beauty is absolutely subjective. It is totally in the eye of the beholder. There could be arguments about whether William Shakespeare is better than William Wordsworth. You could argue about beauty with anything, but it wouldn't really make any sense because it's just dependent on that person's personal point of view. There are very nice passages in the Quran, but you could also say there's very nice, beautiful pieces of writing throughout the centuries, throughout the world, from many people who don't claim it to be from a god. As I mentioned before, you know, Shakespeare, Wordsworth, you know, they're classics. You know, even the Islamic poet Rumi, the works that he's done have been so stunningly beautiful, and many people are kind of mesmerized by people's work. That alone wouldn't make something from a god. So there are so many amazing works, but also we wouldn't really be able to recreate them exactly. If someone said, I want you to recreate Rumi's work exactly as it was, or I want you to create a full play that Shakespeare would have done exactly as he would have done it, no one would be able to recreate anything that someone else has done. And the point also of Muhammad being illiterate was also not something that was unusual. Most people were illiterate at that time, and actually a lot of those illiterate people would recite kind of stories and poetry on the spot. You know, it was very much a part of that culture. And in fact, you know, the Prophet Muhammad had composed the Quran over 23 years. So really there's nothing that miraculous about it. A lot of Muslims actually don't speak Arabic or know the classical Arabic, will often just take this at face value though, where their teacher will just say to them, these words are so perfect, you don't really understand them, but they really are perfect and the most eloquent thing you'll ever see in your life.
The Quran actually puts forward a challenge that if this book was from other than God, God challenges human beings to bring or to make something that is comparable to it. Now, this challenge is often misunderstood by people, and they think it's just, you know, like, well, okay, so the Quran is beautiful, right? So the Arabs thought it was nice and it sounded beautiful, but you know, Shakespeare is nice as well, and we have lots of poets, they make nice poems. So what? That doesn't mean it's from God, which is a fair enough point, but that's not what the Quran is saying. And whoever says that doesn't understand the context of this challenge. And the context of this challenge is that Arabic in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, the Arabic language in the time of the Prophet Muhammad in that location, was something that was clearly defined in respect to its compartments of speech. So there were different types of speech. There was poetry, there was rhymed prose, there was rhetoric, there was normal speech, There was another type of speech called sijin, which was it's how soothsayers, they used to talk in a special type of speech. And whenever someone spoke in Arabic, you could define which one of these categories that person was speaking in. Poetry itself was divided into 16 or 17 bihar. So there's 16 forms of poetry in Arabic as well. So what's interesting about the Quran is that it didn't conform to any of those patterns. It was itself a unique pattern. It was a new and unique pattern of speech, a unique format, so to speak. And this is a very specific challenge of the Quran. Not just to produce something eloquent and beautiful, but to bring a format of speech, of Arabic speech, that is of comparable beauty and impact. So this is what left the Arabs of the time, by the way, until today, unable to respond. Until today, unable to respond. The Quran still retains that position of being a unique form of the language.
So, how did I become a Muslim? I remember when, I did become a Muslim. I often would go to websites or read pamphlets put out by Muslims, and they would claim that I converted from Christianity to Islam. And I did not convert from Christianity to Islam. I converted from atheism to Islam. I did not believe in God. So I used to leave the door of my office at the University of San Francisco unlocked, because I knew I would eventually lose my keys. So I left it unlocked so I could get in and out of there without having to keep going down to the main office and asking them to make a new key. So students would leave books in there, assignments, things like that. So one day I walked down to my office. I walk into my office. The door, of course, is open. I go in there. And I see a green text sitting on the middle of my desk. And I assumed a student left a book there. And I walk over to it, and I look at it, and on the cover of it, it says, the Holy Quran, an English interpretation. And I look at it, and I thought, who left that there? Immediately, I knew who must have left that there. It must have been my family, my adopted Muslim family. And then I thought, what are they trying to say by this? I thought they said they didn't want to talk about religion anymore. Now they're leaving a copy of the Quran on my desk? Are they trying to convert me? They're not even religious people. Mahmoud took me to bars and discos. Maybe they're saying if I don't become a Muslim, our friendship can't continue. All these, I'm a very sort of skeptical person, pessimistic. I always assume the worst to begin with. But then as I thought about it more, I realized this was like a peace offering. I could see in their faces they were embarrassed when they said or indicated they didn't want to talk about religion anymore. I thought this was a way of sort of smoothing things out. Jeff, we don't want to talk about it, but if you really are interested in our religion, here's a copy of the Quran, it's our scripture. I knew it was their scripture anyway from other conversations. So I took it as a peace offering. And I didn't even bring the subject up again. I put it on my shelf. Actually, I put it on my coffee table in my apartment in Diamond Heights in San Francisco. I left it there. And then a couple of weeks passed, and when I was a grad student at Purdue University, I shipped all my books by the cheapest method possible to my office in San Francisco, and none of them had arrived yet. So the only books I had with me were the ones I brought in the U-Haul and moving van from from Indiana, that I drove out to California with, and there was only like 20. So in no time at all, I had run out of things to read. So I had nothing to read this night. I looked at the magazines. I had already read them twice. I turned on the TV. It was Johnny Carson. So boring. I turned it off. So, do you know who Johnny Carson is? Oh, all right. So now I'm sitting in my apartment and nothing to read, and I'm looking around, and I look over, and there on my table, side table, is an English interpretation of the Holy Quran. So I pick it up and think, why not? I'll read a few pages, I'll get bored, I'll put it down. You know, maybe lucky, hopefully it'll bore me to the extent that I'll go to sleep. No, I mean seriously, I wasn't expecting much. You know, although, you know, some scriptures I had read were very beautiful, had beautiful stories. So I thought, you know, maybe the stories, the myths, etc. will be interesting. So I pick it up. I'm going to get through this part in the next 10 minutes. I pick it up. I am boring, am I not? Yeah. It's like when I teach mathematics. You know, I'm really into it, and then I look at my students, and I'm getting all excited, and I turn to my class, and they're all looking at me like, can we leave now? I pick it up, and I look at the first surah. I turn to the first surah, and I'm just reading it out of academic curiosity. And it's obviously a hymn of praise to me. It's like a psalm for those of you who know the Bible. At least it starts that way. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, all praise be to God, ruler of all worlds, master, king, or master of the day of judgment. Actually, the day of requital, the day of recompense, the day when accounts are settled. To you alone, and then it goes on from there. And I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, oh, a hymn of praise, a psalm. Then I get to the end of it, and then as I get to the end of it, I realize, oh, the last few lines slipped into, made a subtle transition into a prayer for guidance. Show us the straight path, the path of those whom you have favored, not those who have gone astray, or upon whom is violence or wrath. And I thought, what a clever author. You know, he tricked me into making a prayer for guidance, a supplication for guidance. Clever man. So I assume that, of course, the Quran had a human author. So I turn to the next surah, and it begins Alif, Lam, Mim, 3 Arabic letters. Then that is the book, wherein no doubt is the guidance for those who are on their toes or vigilant. So I read it and I look at it and say, so are you talking to me? Are you saying that this prayer for guidance that I just inadvertently made, you're now saying that this is the guidance that I was seeking? And I look at the opening line and again it says, that is the book. And I thought, the author has a very interesting style. See, from this point in the Quran, the beginning of the second surah, from here on out, the perspective is God addressing the reader, God speaking to the reader. I always thought, you know, scripture should be like the ones I was exposed to. Stories, ancient history, a biography of a prophet or something. This is direct, God talking to the reader, addressing the reader. I thought, now the author of this book definitely was original. He actually wrote a revelation from God to humanity, which is what you would think a revelation would be. But not only that, he has a very engaging style. He gets you to ask questions, and then gives answers, and then creates more questions. Somehow, this Quran, he wrote it in a style that gets you into a dialogue with the scripture, like that just brief dialogue I just mentioned. I'd have that experience repeatedly as I read through the Quran. This dialogue, I'd find myself drawn in, I'd ask a question. A few lines later, sometimes a couple passages later, maybe I would see an answer, and then I would create another question, and then I was involved in this veritable dialogue with the scripture. So I keep on reading the Quran. I think I'm impressed by the author's original and ingenious style.
your life.
When I was at that time in approximately in the 40s, received Muslim patients in Paris, and when I had the opportunity to speak with many of them concerning their religion. For me, originally, I thought that the Quran was the work of a man. I took the decision to learn Arabic in Paris. I was 50 exactly at that time. The students are able to read the parts of the Quran which are not too much difficult, like most of the passages of Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, and at the same time, modern Arabic, like Al-Ayam min Taha Hussein, to compare the Arabic language of the Quran, Al-Fusha, with modern Arabic. That was an excellent thing for us to make a comparison and to feel that the language of the Quran was something without any comparison.
And there's a huge assumption about how the Arabs were in agreement essentially about its perfection. But the reality is Arabs at that time and many years after had criticised the Quran and disagreed that it was very eloquent.
Walid bin Mughira was considered as one of the chiefs of the Arabs, one of the leaders of the Arabs, and was considered to be one of the most eloquent of the Arabs. He was so much, because of his position, he was chosen to go to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and convince him to leave this call of his. So he went to him and he said, "Yeah, Muhammad, you've called our fathers stupid. You have separated between father and child. You've broken down our families. You've caused chaos in our societies. If what is wrong with you is if you're mentally ill, we'll get a doctor for you and we'll heal you with our own money. If you want money, we will gather all our money and make you the richest Arab, right? If you want position, a high position, we will make you the king of Mecca, right? If you want marriage, we will look for the most beautiful woman in Mecca and give it to you as a wife, right? Whatever you want, drop this call, right? You know, the Prophet Muhammad didn't interrupt him, by the way. Imagine someone offering you such preposterous nonsense, right? And you know, the Prophet Muhammad with his adab, right? He didn't interrupt him. And even after he finished, he said to him, "Hal faraghta ya Abul Walid? Have you finished?" Then Walid bin Mughira said, "Yes, I've finished." He said, "Fasma' ma 'indi." Now hear what's with me, right? And what did he recite? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. He recited the following verses. Hamim tanzilum min ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Kitabun fussilat ayatuhu Qur'anan Arabiyyan liqawmin ya'qilun. He recited up to 40 verses, but because of time I won't be able to do that, right? So he recited 40 verses. Now I want you to now put yourself in Walid bin Mughira's shoes for a second. Imagine yourself to be one of the most eloquent in your language, right? One of the most eloquent in your language. And this guy, this person, you've come here to convince him to stop this new message he's brought. And the first two letters he utters throws you into a state of absolute ignorance. Hameen. He thinks, what is that? He couldn't compare that to anything he'd heard before. There was no previous time like that. He thought, what is that? And in a state of, what is that? What is that? Allah responds straight to him. Tanzilun min ar-Rahmanir Rahim. The word tanzilun in the Arabic language is indefinite. Meaning, even though the translation is a revelation, in the Arabic language, when Arabs hear something indefinite, they know that they don't know the reality of that thing. Right? Because something Allah could have said, at-tanzilu, the revelation. Right? Which he did in another part for another reason, where he says ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ. He points to a book at you, but let's not do that now. But anyway, so he said تَنْزِيلٌ مِّنَ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ. This is a revelation from Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Now he knew who Ar-Rahman was. He knew who Ar-Rahim was. But this tanzil, right, this revelation, it threw him into more, some more yearning for what is this? What is this? And then he continues to describe him. كتاب فصلت آياته قرآنا عربيا لقوم يعقلون. Right? And then when he got back, another effect of the Arabic language, when he went back to his people, you know what the first thing they said to him was? يا أبا الوليد لقد رجعت بوجه لم تذهب به. You've come back with a face that you did not leave with. So his face was physically, visibly changed by the Quran. Because he had what? The Arabic language. Right? Because he knew what this was. And when they said that to him, they said to him, so what should we do to him? Right? When they said that to him, that you've come back with a face we've not come back with, he said, what's wrong with you? He said, Wallahi laqad sami'tu kalaman lam asma' mithlahu qatt. That I have heard something, I've heard a speech that I have not heard anything like it before. And then on the spot, this is how you want to know how eloquent he is, on the spot he composed a few lines of poetry, which he says, Wallahi innahu lahalawa. Indeed, by Allah, this is very sweet. Wa inna alayhi laqalawa. And he said, this is not human. And then they said, Abu Walid, you've changed, you've apostated, you've gone against the religions of your forefathers. He said, Wallahi, I have not done that. Right? And then he said, but this is just poetry, they said. He said, I know every single style of poetry. I know the rhythms, I know the length, I know all of the styles of poetry. This is definitely not poetry. Then they said, then this is fortune telling. He said, I know all the styles of fortune telling. This is not fortune telling. They said, then it's magic. He said, we know all the styles of magic that exist. This is not magic. Right? Then he said, then he's a madman. He said, we know all the styles of madmen and all the styles of eloquence. This is not the word of a mad person. Then they said, then what is it? He said, this is not the word of a human being. مَا هَذَا قَوْلُ الْبَشَرِ. He said, this is not the word of a human. Now, he said this because of what he had of the Arabic language.
And actually have criticized it on certain grammatical errors and certain constructional errors. So there's a really good example of a person called Al-Razi. Now he basically was very well known within the Arab Golden Age. So he was a philosopher and a physician. And he basically said that the Quran was absolutely not perfect and that basically 1,000 of those could be created. And there are many others. I'll actually put some down below. There are some people also within the Muslim community that will say the Quran isn't perfect. An 11th century Sunni scholar that basically said, look, we do not claim that the Quran is the highest rank of eloquence. And by the way, I'm only talking about the writings of the Quran. I haven't even gone into the context, but I feel like that's a whole nother thing.
Next question.
Proper 12. Proper Irish whiskey from a proper Irish animal. That's what I'm talking about. I came here to have a buzz with this. I almost didn't get the glass. I almost didn't get the bottle into the arena. I anticipated that. I anticipated that they weren't going to let me in with my big bottle. So I had a little sly bottle brought in. You know, you see how tricks up my back pocket all over the gaff. I also brought my own belts because I knew they wouldn't have my fucking belts up here. I'd love a glass, or not a glass, even a cup, something like a toast with all these fine people here of my proper 12 Irish whiskey, if we could get that. If not, I'm probably going to start drinking it out of a bottle. If the bottle gets empty, I don't know what I'll do with this man and an empty bottle. You know what I'm like. So please, someone in the back, get me a cup, a plastic cup, please. Thank you.